Welcome to Aligned, a podcast for lawyers seeking deeper meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in their work and lives. My name is Jessie Brown. I practiced law for 15 years before becoming an executive and career coach for lawyers. I also facilitate workshops for law firms and retreats for women lawyers. In season 1 of this podcast, we explored what a career that aligns with who we are and what matters most to us can look like. And in season 2, we're exploring how to make those courageous choices to bring that aligned career into reality. So today we have a very special guest, Cindy Pensino. Cindy wears a lot of hats. She's a lawyer, a mediator, a yoga teacher, mindfulness teacher, a life coach, and she also facilitates retreats. Cindy, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
No, thank you so much, Jessie. I'm so honored and happy to be here.
Well, I am so honored to have you. And, we connected on LinkedIn, which, again, if somebody had told me 5 years ago I'd be meeting people like you through LinkedIn, I wouldn't have believed it. But I'm really glad that we were able to connect through that platform. And I've been really inspired, following you and seeing you create what I see as a very authentic career that aligns really well with who you are, your values, your strengths, and what matters to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved our conversation earlier on this honesty piece and how we have this in common that the number one value in action from my inventory, my VIA inventory was honesty and how it plays out in my day-to-day life is that I have to be true to what I believe and who I am and my strengths and skills. And that's why I wear all those hats because I have that sort of rainbow palette that I like to be creative with and engage with in my work in the world and in my relationships. So that honesty piece actually just means for me that I have to be authentic.
Hmm. Yes. And, I'm curious if you could share with our listeners, like, what is that authenticity or being authentic? What does that mean to you? Because that's such a buzzword right now. And I talk about it a lot and it's super important to me as well. But I would love to hear just from your perspective what that means.
Yeah. And I'll just say, having practiced law for some decades now, I think 2.5 decades, almost, yeah, 2.5 decades, and yoga for almost 3 decades, to see words like authenticity and in alignment become so much more in the common vernacular. It tickles me because this is something that I've been talking about with my friends and in my circles and studios for a long time. And now a lot of that matters. It has been given an audience. And so I love that you have an audience of people who are curious about how to live in the world in a way that feels most aligned with their heart, with their strengths, with their energy. And and yeah, that's kind of what I do. That's why I had to teach yoga to lawyers and I had to take people on retreats and then getting continuing legal ed credit for them became, wow, what a coup. That makes it all the more enriching. And so, yeah, this is who I am. This is what I do. Is yes, I practice law. Yes, I mediate. And um, I think the teachings from yoga, like non-harming, in medicine, they take the Hippocratic Oath. So, first do no harm. And in law, sometimes our oath for being a zealous advocate, excuse me, I think that we can stumble over ourselves trying to be a zealous advocate for something that may be completely misaligned with our integrity, with our values, and with our sense of self. And so, one time, this is years ago, probably right before I started taking folks on retreat, like lawyer yoga retreats. I remember being at Gray Bear Retreat Center in the middle of Tennessee, deep in the woods. And I came up after the end of yoga class, from the final resting pose from Shavasana. And the way that my brain felt, and I felt so expansive, I thought, this is the mind that should be making decisions for others, or that should be guiding others through their biggest life challenges. you know? And so I knew that I need to keep doing more of this, because what this does for my brain, and the person that I can bring into the world, is irreplaceable. There's just like nothing else. And so that was a click, a moment. That was probably more than 15 years ago that I had that, like, I'm going to change my life, and I'm going to do it by sharing this with other people.
Thank you for sharing that, Cindy. That's beautiful. And what it reminds me of, both hearing about this rainbow of who you are and all these things that you do, the services you provide, and all these things that bring you, meaning and purpose. And then this moment you had coming up from Shavasana reminds me of last week's episode on Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor's whole brain living model. So that
Mhm.
moment after the yoga class reminds me of that character four. So that wise, grounded, witness, observer presence. And I know we were chatting before we started recording about, characters 3 and 1 and how those come into play in our work. So I would love to hear, for any of our listeners who haven't listened to that episode. It's a short one, it's 18 minutes, so I encourage you to listen to it. Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor was a Harvard brain scientist who had a left hemorrhage stroke and did recover full capacity of both hemispheres of her brain, but has provided this model, whole brain living, into these different regions of the brain and what it's like when we are, accessing different regions and embodying them. And I think using all four to navigate our career is a really fascinating way, because it's very easy to sort of be left brain dominant as a lawyer. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you, how these characters show up in your career.
Oh, well, thank you. I was saying earlier that, well, this week is really a week where I'm focused on my professional development business and my speaking and coaching. And last week was a week that I was like, whoo, mediating and drafting contracts and handling the admin from a successful mediation. And but moving into each each one, to answer your question, there are a lot of times when I realize that I don't need to be in the litigator mode with a client. And particularly in family law, there's often great distress when folks feel that their most basic, ground level needs of security and stability and care for their children, if those are at risk. And that's how people feel with, a family law dispute often. I remember thinking, okay, in this conversation, post mediation, after we've signed a deal, I have a client who seems like she's mad and maybe wants something else, something extra. And rather than charging in to, well, we can fix it this way, or no, you can't have that, I tapped into my coach skills, and I was using part four, excuse me, and really asking her how it is that she wants to be in the future, and giving her options for what may be available now. And so it wasn't the I'll fix your problems for you litigator, and I will, or you're, or not. But it was the coach who can inquire and let the answer come from within.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And she realized that maybe she would make do with a little bit less for the next 2 weeks. And after a couple of weeks, it's going to be okay. So I think that giving her a question rather than a yes or a no, or a yes, I can take more, I can fight and that'll cost more money. It was that observer. I could step back and say, okay, how do I want this to play out? And how might she want this to play out if she's given a little bit of time to rest and sit with it, and even probably tap into her own observer as she sits with it for a minute.
Wow, what a powerful shift that, you facilitated for her. And if we think of that whole brain living model, I think of it as that shift from a character two, which is that, um, left brain emotional. It can be fear, anger, frustration, irritation, but what we think of as like the difficult emotions. And that character four, I do see as being sort of the antidote or the balance to character two. And that's what you were able to help her access. And I am curious, you said something a moment ago about how in family law it can bring up these, kind of like primal needs for security or safety or these concerns.
Yeah.
And when I talk with lawyers who are navigating their career, sometimes that comes up as well. And sometimes, it's accurate. Sometimes it's not necessarily accurate. They have enough financial resources, but there could be some financial scarcity concerns. Sometimes it goes back to childhood and things like that. So we tend to explore fears, especially around finances, when they're wanting to go maybe from a large law firm to an in-house role or a nonprofit, or to pivot out of law. There's often a financial trade-off that's involved. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on a lawyer who might be navigating some of those like real financial concerns. I have a client, actually, he just came to mind, who is a senior, he's a counsel position at a large firm, and he has three little kids under 5. His wife's in house, but we've done the strengths and values assessments, we've done all this. I mean, this guy would thrive in house. He's so relational, he's so team oriented. There's just so many things about him where he really, I think, would be wonderful as an in-house attorney. And that's actually what he wants. Like, we've explored many paths, and he's like, that's for sure what he wants to do. It's the financial piece that is concerning for him. And they've developed a certain lifestyle, and they have 3 little kids. So there are real financial concerns. But I'm curious what you would say about that, or using either your coach skills, your experience, your mindfulness skills to somebody facing those types of concerns.
Hmm. There are probably two avenues I would want to explore with that client. On a practical level, part number one, what does it really like having a couple budgets, a parallel, like what is life like if we keep in this home and this lifestyle? How does that continue to look? Like really do the projections and the math. And what if we do a slightly different one? But then another, where I really love to go is to, well, take people out in nature and be in nature. 48, 72 hours would be ideal, but have that quiet time in nature to start to think deeply and from the heart about what really matters to me. And I just, to me, it's a rare in-house counsel job that can't provide more than basic needs. I'm not saying like, you know, you can have more than basic needs met. In fact, private school, travel, retirement savings can all happen from probably an average in-house counsel job, you know?
Right.
So
Yes.
how much do we need? Because what matters? And for me, sitting next to some running water and being out in nature helps me get a lot more grounded and centered in what I care about. And what I care about is probably my child, my friendships, my ability to grow and self actualize. That's stuff I care about. And so, if that's what I really care about, um, do I need a new $100,000 vehicle? Probably not. Do I need whatever? Do I need another 100,000 each year? Maybe, maybe not. Those sit with it kind of opportunities um, are what I would encourage of anyone feeling like they are in a scarcity mindset for an option that from the outside looks like actually it's pretty darn sweet.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, that's so good. So many things came to mind as you were sharing because that was really powerful what you said. And last week I had dinner with a former colleague. We worked at a law firm together about 8 or 9 years ago, and now she's a senior in-house lawyer, really likes her job, is doing very well, and is earning a good income. And she told me, so she's a woman who loves designer luxury items. And
Yes.
what's funny is maybe 5 years ago, we were at lunch with some other lawyer friends, and I had said something about my own realization that I had been spending like my bonuses and things on like a designer purse. And I was like, I don't actually care about this. Like, it doesn't bring me any happiness. I don't know why I'm doing this. It's like, and I remember at that lunch, she said, she had like a Prada bag and she said, this does bring me happiness. And I was like, okay, to each their own, is fine. But last week, she said, this year I reached all my financial goals, and there was some very luxury bag that she wanted, and she bought three of them. And these are like in the many thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And she said, I met my dream of owning these bags. And she said, and they're meaningless. They're just expensive leather. They didn't bring me any joy. And she's like, and I'm looking at this stuff. What does all this mean? And I was like, wow, because she had this insight that she came to in her own timing. But she said, I love what I do for work, but she's doing some inner work around what is my why, because it was
Mhm.
always these financial goals. And she's like, I've reached all these, and they don't bring me the joy I thought. So anyways, I think what you and I are exploring here is values, which is something we chatted about before we began recording, and really aligning our career related choices with what actually matters to us. And I think spending time in nature can be an amazing opportunity to get clarity on retreat. That can often happen, when you slow down, disconnect from like the hustle and bustle of daily life and get really clear, what actually matters.
Absolutely, because the decisions that we make when our nervous system is activated and we just had a win and someone else lost, and and we are in our go fight win mode,
Yep.
the decisions for and you know what? Her decision to buy those three expensive bags actually might have been the greatest transition and turning point in her life, so right on, own them, sell
Yeah.
them,
She's going to sell them, she said.
like
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
Let someone else dust them off,
Yep.
and 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 use it as I got the bags and I gave them away. And you know what? I am a new person. I have freedom from that old holding on, that old attachment that no longer has a hold within my mind or body. What a gift.
What a gift. Yes, I love that. That's really powerful.
Hmm.
Uh, so speaking of, aligning our work with our values, before we began recording, you shared something that I thought was so powerful, and it was about your legal work and the decision you made to not do the custody battles. And you had mentioned, checking in with your body and what alignment and integrity in your work feels like in your body. So, and with your aligning it with your values. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Um, for years, probably since I had my son, who's 14, I have said no on custody cases, or I will associate and handle financial while someone else takes lead on something custody related. Um, and so there were a lot of reasons for that, but that was something that I realized was going to be important for me. And then having my own child and having some conflict around that really nailed it. That I was not going to spend my precious energy, my mental bandwidth, my inner resources, my nervous system on a conflict that I think can likely harm the whole family, and we were talking about the teachings from yoga, and while I've enjoyed yoga for 3 decades, and one of the teachings is ahimsa and non-harming. And so I was saying we can choose to not harm. And if I were to choose to engage in a custody battle now, first of all, I wouldn't, but it would harm. And that's why I love doing collaborative practice, because when a team rallies around a family, the outcomes are child centric and they are careful, and it's absolutely possible. And so I have invested my energy in that direction. And so, and now, and what's interesting is that I didn't know that this was going to happen in my career, but I started holding myself out as a collaborative attorney 16 years ago and got my mediator training and all of that, same 2010. I now have more couples come to me together like, look, we're pretty much in agreement, we still need some legal help, we need some guidance, and I facilitate. And it's kind of a rare thing, but I end up having couples who can function enough to come to me, and I will be the one to facilitate their divorce. And they keep sending me other friends, and the therapists do too. And it was just because I was honest about what I will do and what I don't want to do anymore.
Wow. That's really inspiring on many levels. One, what's possible in family law and divorce, and also this example of aligning your work with your values, your nervous system. It's so intentional, and this is what's possible. So I think, a lot of lawyers I talk with, they feel stuck in a practice area or a role or a job that is not in alignment. And I mean, this sounds extreme, but I had worked with a client last year who was doing like construction defense litigation, and it was not a great fit for her. She
Uh-huh.
would throw up in a trash can at her desk at work because of anxiety and nerves, and she just all these stress, and she had a lot of migraines and health issues. But I've met with a lot of lawyers who've had health issues, and when we talk about it, it's just out of integrity with like who they are, their values. There's a lot of like the high conflict work, and a lot of the lawyers I talk with are highly sensitive people, and they're very empathic, very compassionate, that heart centered, and then they're in a role that maybe is encouraging them to be really, in a high conflict kind of role, and it's just not a good fit. But what you're doing shows what's possible
Thank
as a
you.
lawyer. Yeah, I think it's really inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a colleague, she coached with a friend of mine, and she started in litigation right after law school. And same way, she was in tears, physically not well. After 18 months of it, she thought that she was going to just go be an artist because she's also an artist. And one thing led her to get on LinkedIn and do a little bit of research. She is now in-house counsel at a healthcare tech company and thriving because she listened to what is within her uh, skill set, and what is not in alignment. Because if something is causing vomit and tears regularly, that's not in alignment.
Yes.
That's out of alignment with one's center. And there's so much else to be done.
Much else. Well, that's an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that, because I mean, it shows a couple things. One, the wisdom of our body. So we're talking about how the body reacts when we're out of alignment. There's often physical symptoms. So that's a source of information that, lawyers can look to when navigating their career, what's happening in their body and emotionally. And we were chatting before we began recording that we've both done the Clifton Strengths Assessment, and it sounds like we have a very similar profile. So really high on the maximizer, the relational, we want to make things better, we want to connect with people, and this is what we're strong in naturally. And when I was at my last law firm going through sort of a leadership training program, we did the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And that's when I think you and I both had people tell us, your profile looks a lot different than a lot of lawyers. And that's what she told me. And I realized it sort of a light bulb went on, like, maybe this is why litigation, I mostly did employment defense litigation. Maybe this is why this always had felt so off for me. And I tried to make it work, like a square peg in a round hole, like tried to make it work for a long time. And finally, there was one case where I was deposing a plaintiff who was a female surgeon at a hospital system who had been terminated. Her employment was terminated. And in reviewing discovery, I actually felt she was alleging gender discrimination. And reviewing the materials, I thought, she might have a claim. Like and I actually respect her as a female professional who's worked very hard to get to where she is. And I did think she was subjected to mistreatment. And in deposing her, my position is defending the organization. So I'm trying to frame her termination as justifiable. And in that deposition, I felt like I was going to vomit, and I wasn't nervous. It was just like, this is out of integrity with my values. And I decided to stop doing that type of work. I had been doing it for almost 15 years at that point, and I switched to estate planning at my firm. They allowed me to make a practice area shift because I just thought, I can't do this type of work anymore. Yeah.
Congratulations. Thank
Well,
you for
thank you.
listening. You listen to your body, right?
Really. It took a while.
Sometimes it takes a little while. Sometimes you go on retreat right at the right time. Sometimes
Right.
sometimes it takes some medications to realize that that you're on a path that you don't want to be on. And but thank goodness your new path opened up. And
Yeah, thank you.
yes, thank you. Thank you for doing what you do. I think it's so exciting to see the legal profession slowly but surely embracing coaching and the tools from coaching practice that many other professions have embraced for a long time. And the lawyers have a turn now. Like our legal profession now has a turn thanks to the Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing report, thanks to the Mindfulness in Law Society, thanks to so many movers and shakers like you and some of our colleagues we've talked about saying, gosh, I have gifts to share and I want to share them with lawyers.
It's been amazing to see this shift, and I'm sure you've seen this over the last, been in the legal industry for about 20 years, and you had a few more years than me. But to see the shift over this time has been so inspiring. And last week I did a workshop at a law firm on burnout prevention, and I have a few topics I can present on. And the last two times I've been hired for a workshop, they both an in-house legal department and a law firm wanted burnout prevention and well-being, lawyer well-being versus like some tool. I have workshops on how to give feedback and leadership and stuff, and they really wanted the burnout prevention. And what I was inspired to see was this room of lawyers from senior equity partners to brand new attorneys openly discussing their experiences of chronic stress or burnout and really talking about the challenges and how to, cultivate true well-being and not, burn out. And we talked a little bit, you and I earlier, about creating like a safe space or psychological safety. And I saw this in this law firm where junior associates shared about being postpartum and the challenges, and senior equity partners talked about their experiences of burnout. And I was like, wow, this is a safe space they've created, this culture. So it just showed what's possible.
Yes, I'm so happy to hear that and to see avenues, to see law firms where there's a shift, where leadership cares, understands, and is going to allocate resources to take care of, all the geese that are laying the golden eggs in the legal field. Uh-huh.
Yes, yes. I think about in that book, Essentialism, Greg McCowan, it's such a great book. He talks about, protect the asset, but like the lawyer is the asset. Yes, protect the asset. Yeah.
Exactly. Protect the asset, cherish the asset, build up the people. And yeah, and now we have all of these tools that are so much more commonplace.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, it's wonderful. So to pivot a little bit, because I think this would be really interesting for our listeners, you and I were discussing before we began recording your path and in sort of over time, gradually reducing some of the legal services you offer and gradually expanding yoga teaching, retreat facilitation, and some of the other work that you do, your coaching work. And why I loved hearing about that is my path also has been this gradual. I did leave law a couple of years ago, but I was coaching before I left law. I was doing some retreat work, and I reduced over a few years my legal work while I built up the other work. And I think that is often what it looks like. It's not an overnight transition for many of us. So for guests who might be interested, maybe it's their act two. I have some lawyers who are, they've been practicing for 15, 10, 20 or more years, and they are looking to transition into something else. I would just love to hear about your experience, if you could share with our listeners in navigating that transition.
Yeah, sure. At the moment, I'm on the Mills Mindfulness and Law Society Faculty Circle. And so that is the umbrella or the home under which I share my professional development, the wellness related coaching, teaching, speaking engagements. Mindfulness and Law Society has also sponsored retreats that I've led. And in the past, I've had a business partner that we have done professional development for entities. There was one within the past 5 years, I saw, wow, the demand increased for all sorts of well-being related trainings, and then some decrease, and funding, of course, changed. And so I'm really happy that I've for 1 year, I was doing more professional development and coaching and in law firms and leading retreats. And that started to take more precedence. And then the next year, gosh, my family law practice kind of bubbled up. And it's been rather organic. And I'll say there were a lot of years in the past where I was practicing a lot more law, yearning to take lawyers on retreat and teach yoga. And I would do, but now it's at an interesting homeostasis where, like I said, last week it was more law. This week it's a little more professional development. And allowing and setting goals for the whole, for the whole brain, the whole self in each area. Like I want to give myself ample time for creativity and play. And that's what I get. I get that when I lead retreats. And I get it some, you be in law firms and doing their professional development work and coaching. Oh my goodness, there can be a lot of play and fun. And there's also a lot of wisdom keeping, right? As the observer, when we get into these different roles, we help others become better observers of their own lives and their own strength. And so I guess what I would say is make space for the possible, and volunteer. Like maybe it's hey, I can organize that continuing ed around this subject that I love. I'll teach it. I can give it. You know, one of the things, one of my teachers, I can't remember who wrote this, but probably this is probably thousands of years old, but the message was um, if you want to know something, study it, but if you want to master, teach it. And if you want to become good, practice, but when you want to master something, teach it. And I think that's what yoga has done for me, from the breath work, from the mindfulness based practices to the body and the somatic experiencing we learn by being on our yoga mat and taking time for a deep yoga practice. We learn so much about ourselves, and so take those lessons and see what you might be able to share is really what I have done in order to bring that creative side out that was yearning for outlet in my life, in my lawyer life.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And what you just said about this creative side yearning for this outlet, that is a theme I hear again and again and again with my clients. I hear it so often where they have achieved so much success. They're senior in-house or equity partner or whatever they are. They're in some position where they've been very focused. And we know that tends to be that character one, which is amazing. A character one gets stuff done and it's so valuable. But that character three, to reference Jill Bolte Taylor's model of whole brain living, that character three is that present moment, play and fun and sensory awareness and adrenaline and the body and all of the enjoyment and that we can experience and creativity. Absolutely. So I've been sharing with friends and clients since discovering this whole brain living. I'm like, I have a hypothesis. Could it be your character three is like longing for some, time, because character one has kind of been driving the show for 80% of the time. And a lot of the women and the clients I talk with, they say yes, and I have a client who's just signed up for improv. Another one is doing bachata dancing. Another one is doing a pottery class. But I share these stories just because, and another one out in nature, she just went to Jackson Hole and had this nature adventure and was like so lit up, and they did line dancing. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm having so much fun. So I think sometimes it's those things that are really wanting to just be a part of our life.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think is super important when I am able to take folks on retreat, is that there is time and space just for play. And starting off with that psychological safety means that we know that someone's not going to be on a phone, that's not a part of retreat. We know that there's maybe no alcohol. So we know that there are some sort of ground level agreements that help us become very present and calm, you know, and that's the groundwork for creating psychological safety. That's the groundwork for really understanding mindfulness practice in the everyday, be it maybe it's on retreat that you understand how this can be part of my everyday. But that's a great start.
Absolutely. Yes, I know. I had worked at a retreat center about 25 years ago. I loved retreats, and then I went to some meditation retreats in law school and shortly after, and then in my 30s really didn't. I was like cross country move, little kids, second bar exam, a lot of things happening. But I returned to retreats around when I turned 40. And I think my first was a yoga retreat out in nature, and it changed my life. Like 4 days yoga, we were sitting around the campfire, howling at the full moon, banging on drums. Like it was, and really there was that psychological safety
Yeah.
that the yoga teachers, the retreat facilitators created for us. And there were women of all ages, which I love connecting across the generations. So it was just a beautiful experience. And I started going more and more whenever I could to retreats, and it really started shifting things. So as you said, I learned tools to bring into my daily life, and also had time for a lot of reflection on retreat
Yeah.
and fun and just awakening to that. I think of the wild woman archetype and awakening to that part of myself. I think yoga retreats is actually what kind of awoke that part of me.
Exactly. I think it does so often to be able to, maybe you really actually do howl. Maybe you or
Yeah.
just sigh a sigh
Yeah.
that you haven't been able to let out anywhere else. And that time and space, where no one else is demanding, we are cared for,
Hmm.
um, can relax a nervous system enough to like, oh, okay, now I can see myself. I can be the observer so much easier. I can be at peace and aware, and in life can be completely different. But we often need that little shift out of the norm,
Yes.
removed from our everyday.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, one last thing I wanted to mention is this concept of the portfolio approach when it comes to a career. So this is something I explore with some of those clients who do want to continue practicing law in some capacity, but they are looking for more of that creative outlet, or maybe it's work that's like really purposeful for them, and for some reason their law work doesn't provide that, and they're looking for that. And I see you as somebody who has done the portfolio approach really well. So that looks like different streams of income, different streams of purpose and meaning and fulfillment that, and even use different characters of the brain in your work. So I'm curious if you could just share a little bit about that, what I see as a portfolio approach to your work.
Oh gosh, well, thank you for saying that. I'll tell you what, I did my mediator training in North Carolina, right outside of Asheville, 16, 17 years ago. And I remember Asheville, like Sedona, has this really vibrant community of artists and craft and makers. And a lot of them are also lawyers and firefighters and teachers. And everyone's got a side hustle in Asheville. And there's a lot of other communities. Boulder is like this. Well, have a side hustle, have a little extra because not only does it bring in, other resources, but it's an outlet. And so that's probably where I first noticed that, oh, this is normal. I like this. I like being in this community where I might put up one business card for one thing I do and another, for another on a bulletin board at the cute local grocery store. So I haven't really known about the portfolio approach until our conversation. And, yeah, here years later, I see that that's what I am now doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, it really feels natural to me to not be tied down to just one way of doing things. That has always been very hard. I knew that unlike my mom, who thrived in a big corporate environment, there's no way I could do that. That is a zero. There's no way. Zero possibility of me being okay long term in a big, cold corporate machine. Mm-mm. And so I think that, having some of these cottage industry creative outlets that might turn into a full time or stay part time, whatever. At this moment, I don't need to know the outcome or the final destination. I just need to know that I'm doing right by myself and my pace to give myself the creative outlet and the community connection that I get by offering what I love.
Amazing. I love that. And I love that it sounds like we're really tuned into yourself. And I know maybe it's because you have done yoga, it's been such a big part of your life for so long. You were connected to yourself at a younger age because when you say, like, I knew I couldn't do the cold corporate thing, I'm like, I sort of had a sense, but I didn't really trust it. And I remember I look back and I think of how when I was in law school, I remember reading an issue of some yoga magazine, like Yoga Journal or something. And they actually profiled a woman who had been a lawyer, had left law and opened like a yoga retreat in the Shenandoah Mountains. And that's near where I lived. And I think there were animals, like an animal sanctuary there. And I was like, she is my hero. And I'm like, maybe I should have paid attention that not the corner office partners, but like that woman was who I aspired to be like when I was 25, before I even started practicing. But I chose the big, law route. And I just think what you're describing shows the value of tuning into yourself and realizing there's more than one way to practice law, to be a lawyer. And sometimes when I work with lawyers who really want that creative outlet or something that provides more meaning and purpose for them, it does require carving out space. So some legal jobs, especially if you're at a large firm, or some in-house jobs, but especially a large firm, and they have young children, often there's no energy or time outside of those two things for a creative pursuit or something like that. So it does sometimes mean modifying. I know for me, I was a senior counsel at a big firm and I reduced my billable hours, which gave me the space because I have children as well, to attend coach training, to start, meditation teacher, breath work, some of my other interests. So it sounds like your practice mediation and the family law work you do provides that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And mine being self-directed, self-employed, solo firm, I have control. I have a significant amount of control over my schedule and where I will schedule myself and where I will leave a lot of space in the summer. And and leave a lot of space for holidays and family time. And I understand that push to bill at a certain level. And that's a rub. And that's a rub that requires a lot of honesty with oneself. Do I, how, how much do I need to bloom in another way that will allow me to do, like, what do I really need is number one question. What do I really need? And sometimes it's not the extra, like we said, extra 100,000. Maybe it's really need an extra 5 hours a week to myself.
Yes. Yes.
And that's worth a lot.
It's worth so much. I remember, when I was at the height of like working in a large firm, my kids were young, I was billing a lot, my husband's a lawyer, like life was busy. The thing
Yeah.
I wanted more than anything, it was this phrase, slow mornings. And I was like, and I did give up a couple $100,000 for slow mornings. I have slow mornings. I don't book meetings in the morning for several hours. I meditate, I read, I work out, have whatever I want to do. But like that was, and with my kids, I can connect with them in the morning. I can give them a hug. I'm not frazzled rushing out the door. It was a financial trade off, but I was like, I want slow mornings. That was just, yeah. So different for everybody, but that was my big wish that I really wanted.
Absolutely. I absolutely understand slow mornings. Even, the Jeff Bezos is like, I really need time to putter. You
Yeah.
know, a
Yeah.
lot of really successful people need time that is unstructured, unscheduled, open, soft. Allow a slow yoga practice. Allow a little more lingering in the poetry book or the journal. Just to build in, like, honestly, what if I could get so much more happiness with just 5 hours a week more? That's kind of the question, and that is often negotiable. That
Yes.
maybe, we don't need this mother who's postpartum to be back on this schedule. What if we, what if we ask her what she really needs? Or what if we ask her to share, share what would you really love? Because I think that a lot of firms now are really trying to keep the age range. You know what I mean? They really want to have the blend for good succession planning. And so what that means is that tending to the maybe to the heart needs, to the physical needs, to the lifestyle needs of the generation that's procreating right now while working.
Absolutely. Yes, I love that. And that's what I saw at this firm where I did that workshop last week is interestingly the founding partner of the firm. It was started by some former big law, that's my understanding, folks who wanted to create a different culture. So high quality work, but a different, culture. And
Hmm.
he said he's been working with a coach for 5 years. And I was so happy to hear it. And he's a very successful man. He founded his firm, I think, 40 years ago. And he said to focus on his, act two or his next after his succession plan essentially, and he finds coaching to be really valuable. So I was inspired to hear that. But that's exactly what they said they wanted to do, was tend to that younger generation, because those are the next leaders. Those are the ones to succeed, the senior partners. And they noticed like little signs of burnout with especially people with young kids. And they wanted to, let's get ahead of it, what's happening. So I love to see when firms offer that flexibility, and your career shows people, and I've had other guests on who are solo practitioners. They do tend to be some of the happiest lawyers. They are like, I do think they have a lot of autonomy over the type of clients they work with, the work they do, their schedule. But even if people are in firms or organizations, sometimes there are alternative arrangements or reduced billable hours or things where you can have those 5 hours a week.
Absolutely. Dr. Martin Seligman is really known as the father of popular psychology and I think one of the past presidents of the American Psychological Association. And his most recent book, the name is escaping me at the moment, but he really talks about agency and how important it is that we are the agent. We are the director of our own lives. And so
Yes.
little things like giving, okay, this person thrives working from home 3 days a week. We get more smiles and billable hours when they're working from home 3 days a week, or whatever. This person really needs to be free to give free legal services or whatever. It's like when we understand what choices the workforce wants to make and what lights them up, we as the leaders in these firms are better able to bring out the best in everyone who's there.
I love that. And I find, I'm sure you see the same thing, when firms or employers provide that flexibility and allow the attorneys to really meet their needs and thrive, it
Mhm.
tends to mean those lawyers are more loyal, more, their retention is much better. And they say every lawyer that leaves due to, burnout or overwhelm, chronic stress, it costs an organization $500,000 minimum to recruit, to train. So there's like a bottom line argument, a financial argument for firms to actually prioritize these things rather than it's a big cost to recruit and train new attorneys. And
Mhm.
something I saw recently that inspired me was one of my clients was at a very large firm, not a good fit for her. She wasn't happy there, and she's at a more mid-sized firm now. And the partners, she's like a seventh, eighth year associate, and the partners are providing genuine mentorship. They're really investing in her, and for like the first time in her career, she's doing great. But one thing I really liked was this senior partner who noticed she was doing primarily two types of litigation, very different types. And one, she like lit her up. She really enjoyed the work and found it very fascinating and genuinely enjoyed it. The other type, not so much. It was kind of draining her. But she's a good soldier, a good worker. And she was like, I'll do whatever the firm needs. But I knew that about her. And her boss observed that and said, I noticed, would you, and he observed, her energy level doing these two different types of work. And he said, would you like to 100% of the time do this? It was like fraud investigation and some certain things, do the work that you enjoy. And she was being the good lawyer, like, I'll do whatever the firm needs. It's okay. And he said, okay, this other type of work, does it make your heart sing? And I thought, what a question from like a senior partner, but does it make your heart sing? And she's like, no. And he said, okay, we're hiring somebody else. We have enough work here. I want you to just 100% do what you love. And we'll find, there's another attorney that will do this other work that likes this work. So that was an example to me of such great leadership and a partner not wanting to, just to help an attorney really operate with her strengths, her interests, what energizes her, that alignment piece. But I think that's kind of rare, but I thought it was a really cool example.
Absolutely. What a beautiful example. And thank goodness. Thank goodness for his leadership.
I know.
I was blessed early on. My dear friend Wanda Shea was my mentor, an amazing mentor. And she was a heck of a family law litigator and just an excellent mediator. But um, many things she taught me. But one of the things that was most beautiful about her was that she wanted me there to have fun too. So when she hired me, I know she interviewed me in a tennis skirt and she was almost out the door to go catch a match. But she said, look, I want to have more fun and I want to have the right kind of people around for that. Meaning she wants to be gone before 5 o'clock to go play. And she wants people around who are going to exercise and play with her. So we played tennis and we did yoga and we walked and we went out and we had fun. And so, yes, and she had real clear boundaries around most afternoons she's going to need a 20-minute nap, leave her alone. And she's gone, right. And she's gone pretty much every day by 4:30. And she's in by 9:30. And more than enough gets done in those hours. No, it doesn't need to be so draining. Now, she may expect someone else to be doing other work that needs to be done, but for her own quality of life, that's what she taught me. And thank goodness for that beautiful female leadership and mentorship.
That is powerful. That's amazing.
Hmm.
Yes. That is not the examples I saw, but I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I love hearing these stories because it just shows the practice of law, like many other professions, it can look so different. And there's so many
Yes.
different ways to practice. And it doesn't have to be this burnout, work so much. Like there are real trade-offs, but it can be what you just described, which is really
Hmm.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Cindy, for our listeners who would love to learn more about you, connect with you, learn about your work, your retreats, your coaching, how can they connect with you?
Thank you so much. Well, there are a few ways. Obviously, you and I found each other on LinkedIn, easy. So you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. I have the Pinsino Firm. Pinsinofirm.com is my lawyer website. Through the Mindfulness in Law Society Faculty Circle, I have a wide array of offerings, like pages of all of the professional development, well-being, and wellness-oriented trainings, coachings, retreats, and the like. And so you can find me on any of those. I'm on Instagram a little bit as well. But yeah, that's the best way to reach me, through any of those three sources: LinkedIn, Mindfulness and Law Society, and Pinsino Firm.
Great. Okay. Well, we will have links to those places in the show notes so people can find you, learn more about your work. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Thank you so much. I have enjoyed it so much, and I'm also really excited about possibilities and seeing you out in your habitat.
Yes. Yes, yes, for our listeners, a teaser. So I'm doing a retreat in October in Sedona with wonderful group of women lawyers, and I'm hoping to make those retreats a fall and a spring, and perhaps something in Scottsdale in the winter. So Cindy and I were talking about potential collaboration, which would be amazing. It would be
Yeah,
amazing.
seems
Yes.
like a really natural, vibrant fit.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
Um, so, for all of our listeners, thank you so much for spending this time with us. This is Aligned, and we are so glad you're here. If you found this episode helpful, please like it, rate, subscribe to the episode. And if there's anyone you know who might benefit, I encourage you to please share this episode with them. And until next time, be well.